For 150 years, science told us the giant squid was a mindless monster that had no intelligence, no strategy, no awareness beyond basic survival, just tentacles and instinct drifting through darkness at the bottom of the ocean. Deep-sea fishermen told stories about them for centuries. Science dismissed every single one, called them myths, called them the imagination of frightened sailors who did not understand what they were seeing. Then in 2000, for a camera captured something at 3,000 feet below the surface. And science has never recovered from what it SAW that IT was a passive predator. It drifted through deep water, waiting for prey to come close enough to grab. No complex behavior, no social interaction, no awareness beyond the most basic survival instinct. Scientists described it as one of the ocean's most primitive intelligent animals, a creature that had existed for millions of years without ever needing to develop anything beyond its size and its tentacles. And every single word of that description was based on dead animals. Not one scientist in 150 years had ever seen a living giant squid in its natural habitat. Everything written about this animal, every textbook chapter, every documentary, every scientific paper, was built entirely on decomposed bodies that washed up on beaches. Bodies that told scientists nothing about how this animal actually behaved when it was alive. Nothing about how it hunted. Nothing about how it communicated. Nothing about what was actually happening inside that enormous head. For 150 years, science built an entire understanding of one of the ocean's largest predators from corpses. And then 2004 arrived. And everything collapsed. September 2004. Pacific Ocean. 3,000 feet below the surface. Two Japanese researchers, Tsunami Kabatara and Kyoichi Mori, had spent years trying to do something no scientist had ever successfully done before. Photograph a living giant squid in its natural habitat. They attached a camera to a baited line and lowered it 900 meters into complete darkness. Then they waited. The camera ran for hours. Nothing appeared. Just black water and silence 3,000 feet below the surface of the Pacific Ocean. The kind of silence that has no sound at all. Not even the movement of water. Just absolute nothing. Then at 9:15 a.m. something entered the frame, not from a side, not from above, from directly below, rising slowly and deliberately out of even deeper darkness. A giant squid, alive, in its natural habitat. For the first time in human history, a living giant squid had been caught on camera in the deep ocean. But what happened next was not what anyone expected. The squid did not drift toward the bait the way a passive, mindless predator would. It stopped. Several meters away from the bait, it simply stopped and stayed completely still, watching, assessing. For several minutes, it did not move a single tentacle. It just observed the bait from a distance, the way an intelligent hunter observes something unfamiliar before deciding what to do with it. Then it changed its angle. It moved left. Then it moved right. Then it came from below. It was testing the bait from multiple positions before committing to an attack. It wrapped its tentacles around the line and pulled, not to eat, but to test the resistance, to feel whether the bait was attached to something larger, to check if it was a trap. Scientists watching the footage in Tokyo could not speak. This was not instinct. This was not the behavior of a primitive passive predator drifting through darkness. This was assessment. This was patience. This was strategy. And it came from an animal that science had spent 150 years describing as mindless. Look at the eye. That single instruction is what a marine biologist gave her research team in 2012 when they finally had access to high-quality footage of a living giant squid. Not the tentacles. Not the body. Not the size. The eye. The giant squid has the largest eyes of any animal on Earth. Each eye measures 11 inches across. To put that in perspective, a human eye is less than 1 inch across. The giant squid eye is 11 times larger than the largest eye any human being has ever had. And for 150 years, science said those eyes existed for one reason only: to see in complete darkness at the bottom of the ocean. That explanation was wrong. In 2012, a team of researchers ran detailed calculations on exactly what those eyes were capable of processing. Not just seeing, processing. The data showed something that stopped the entire research team completely. The information processing capacity of giant squid eyes sits in a category shared only by animals with confirmed complex intelligence. Animals that plan. Animals that remember. Animals that learn from experience. Not deep-sea creatures drifting in darkness. Thinking animals. But the most important discovery was not about what those eyes could see. It was about what they remembered. Scientists exposed giant squids to the same visual stimulus repeatedly and measured their response each time. The first time, full defensive reaction. The second time, reduced reaction. The third time, almost no reaction at all. The squid had recognized the stimulus, categorized it as non-threatening, and adjusted its behavior accordingly. That is not instinct. Instinct does not reduce over time with repetition. What reduces over time with repetition is called learned behavior. And learned behavior requires memory. And memory requires intelligence. Everything science got wrong about giant squid intelligence becomes most clear when you looked how it hunts. Science said it was a passive predator. It waited. It drifted. It grabbed whatever came close enough. That description is not just wrong. It is the complete opposite of what giant squids actually do. Start with the evidence that was hiding in plain sight for decades. Sperm whales eat giant squids. Thousands of them every year. Scientists have known this since they first started examining sperm whale stomach contents over a century ago. But nobody looked carefully enough at the outside of the sperm whale. Because if they had, they would have seen something that changed everything. Scars, circular sucker scars, covering the skin of almost every adult sperm whale ever examined. Some of those scars measuring over 5 inches across. Scars that size do not happen during a passive struggle. Scars that size happen when something is fighting back with intention and force. The giant squid was not just resisting capture. It was actively fighting the largest toothed predator on Earth. But the fighting was not even the most intelligent part. Scientists, analyzing multiple attack records, found a pattern that nobody expected. Giant squids were not striking sperm whales randomly. They were targeting specific areas, consistently, across multiple documented encounters. They were aiming for the eyes of the sperm whale, the single most sensitive and vulnerable point on an animal that can grow to 60 feet long and weigh 45 tons. Think about what that means that a giant squid, an animal science spent 150 years calling primitive, was identifying the anatomical weak point of one of the most powerful predators in ocean history, targeting it deliberately, repeatedly, across different individuals in different parts of the ocean. This was not accident. This was not random thrashing. This was coordinated anatomical targeting. This was the behavior of an animal that understood what it was fighting and knew exactly where to hit it. Science called it mindless. The sperm whale has the scars to prove otherwise. Everything you have just seen, the strategic hunting, the memory, the anatomical targeting, was discovered mostly from dead specimens, stomach contents, and one camera in 2004. Then in 2023 something happened that made all of it look small. Researchers studying giant squid behavior through deep-sea cameras noticed something on the skin of the squids that nobody had paid serious attention to before. The entire surface of the giant squid body was producing light. Not randomly, not constantly, in patterns. Specific repeating patterns that changed depending on what the squid was doing and what was happening around it. They were communicating, not with sound, not with touch, with light. A complex system of bioluminescent signals produced across the entire surface of their bodies in complete darkness 3,000 feet below the ocean surface. Scientists identified at least 6 distinct light patterns used in consistently different situations. A pattern that appeared only when another squid was nearby. A different pattern that appeared only during hunting. Another that appeared only when a threat was detected. Another that appeared only during what scientists described as social interaction between 2 individuals. Social interaction between giant squids. Animals that science spent 150 years describing as solitary primitive creatures that never interacted with anything except their prey. The researcher who led the 2023 study said the discovery felt like finding a language. Not a simple signal system. a language, with different meanings in different contexts, used intentionally, used consistently, used by an animal living in a place so deep and so dark that humans had never watched them long enough to notice they were talking to each other the whole time. Science now knows the giant squid has memory, strategic hunting ability, anatomical targeting, and a complex light-based communication system used socially in complete darkness 3,000 feet below the surface. And here is the part that should stop you completely. All of that, every single discovery, came from one camera in 2004 and a handful of deep-sea observations made since then. We have seen a living giant squid in the wild a total of a few times in all of human history. Every rule they broke, every assumption they destroyed, every piece of intelligence science was forced to admit they possessed. It all came from almost nothing, that we have explored less than 5% of the ocean. The giant squid lives in the other 95%. And in that 95% they have been hunting, communicating, and thinking in the dark for millions of years, completely unobserved, that if almost no contact changed everything science thought it knew. Imagine what we will find when we actually go back and look.